Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Dr. Muhammad Tuhami speaking, and this is a lecture as part of our course History of English Language. And the title of today's lecture is Typological Classification of Languages. In the previous lectures, we talked about the comparative method, and we said that the comparative method requires three kinds of evidence. The first one is linguistic evidence, the second one is historical evidence, and the third one is archaeological information. Today, we are going to talk about a new method which is used by linguists to group languages together in order to prove that these languages belong to one family or descend from one parent. This is called the typological method, and the typological method relies only on linguistic information, and this method uses this information, the linguistic information, to classify languages according to the linguistic characteristics they share. And I want you to remember the difference between the comparative method and the typological classification or the typological method. In the comparative method, we are based on linguistic and non-linguistic evidence. But here, in the typological method, we rely only on linguistic evidence. So languages can typologically be classified according to some shared phonological, morphological, and syntactic characteristics. Remember, the typological method is based on phonological, morphological, and syntactic characteristics. And this means that this method relies again only on linguistic evidence. But most researchers rely on two kinds of linguistic evidence when they follow the typological method. They rely only on morphological and syntactic. And the studies which cover the phonological evidence or the phonological characteristics are very few. As for typological classifications based on morphology, we can talk about the fact that languages, morphologically speaking, languages can be classified into three major classes. The first one is agglutinative, and the second is isolating, and the third is fusional. As for the first one, which is agglutinative, in this method or in this classification, words have a very complex internal structure, and all the morphemes in them can be easily identified. And this can be found in the Turkish language. The second one is isolating, where languages contain independent units that express various kinds of meaning. And an example of this kind of languages is Chinese. Fusional is the third category, where languages can be classified somewhere between agglutinative and isolating languages, and examples of these are Latin and German. So fusional languages do not have separate morphemes marking, for instance, or a case or number. The categories of case and number and gender work in combination to determine the particular morpheme to be used. To continue, we can say that modern English tends to be isolating, although there are some examples where it is considered an amalgam of both fusional and isolating. But generally speaking, we can decide that Old English was a fusional language, and modern English tends to be more isolating than fusional language. What does this mean? A fusional language is a language where the morpheme is part of the word. Let me give you an example of the apostrophe S morpheme which expresses possession. We can say, for example, the boy's book or boy's books. So, in this case, we use the apostrophe S in both singular and plural. In Old English, the same apostrophe S can be used whether the noun is animate or inanimate. By animate, I mean refers to human beings. By inanimate, we mean refers to non-humans. So, in modern English, we say the roof of the house. We cannot say the house's roof because the house is inanimate and it does not take the apostrophe S. So we have to make it an isolating. By isolating, we mean we have to use an isolated word to express possession. And this word is of. So we have to say the roof of the house. In modern English, we cannot say the house's roof. This may be acceptable in Old English, but in modern English, no. We cannot use the apostrophe S to refer to possession with inanimate nouns. Okay, and this shows us that English, modern English, is more isolating than fusional. Now, let's move to the typological classification based on syntax. Syntactically speaking, we talk about the word order of languages. In modern English, for example, we say SVO. So let's talk about how languages are classified typologically according to syntax. When we try to find the most dominant word orders in the world languages, we are going to find that there are 5. And these are SOV, SVO, VSO, VOS, and OVS. The most common criterion for determining word order in a language is the notion of markedness. What is the meaning of markedness? Markedness means the structure or the word order which is mostly common. For example, in modern English, the marked word order is SVO. Any other word order is unmarked. So this is what we mean by markedness. Now, when we talk about the development of languages, we are concerned with 2 terms. Do we consider this development as some sort of a change or as some sort of evolution? Which one? Evolution is a term which is used metaphorically, and its meaning has been extended to cover not just the development of a species, but the development in general. Let me explain it another way. The term evolution is used when we talk about the development of biological species on Earth. So when we talk about the evolution of man, the history of the development of man on Earth as species. And this term is borrowed from biology to be applied to linguistics in order to say that, like what happened in the natural development of species, languages develop in the same way. So in linguistics, there is often some sort of confusion between the term evolution and the term change. And linguists who use the term evolution never imply a direct relationship between language and the evolutionary theories of biology, but they consider it differently. The term is used in linguistics to describe the gradual changes that any language experiences over time. So when we use the word evolution, we talk about the gradual changes of language. For me, I think that the two terms are the same. Whether it is evolution or whether it is change, they express the same idea. Okay, they refer to the fact that languages change all the time, and every day there is some sort of a change in language. Uh, Now I'm going to give you an example of someone who is concerned with the concept of evolution, and this person is called Croft. And Croft gives us a theory, and he called it the theory of utterance selection. And this theory is similar to the theory of natural selection in biology. And according to Croft, we have two kinds of replication. We have normal replication and altered replication. And these are two terms which are used in biology. But in linguistics, he used it differently. When we talked about the normal replication, okay, he gave us an example to illustrate his concept of replication, the replacement of whom by who, okay, as an example to illustrate these kinds of replication. At the beginning, people started using whom. Whom did you invite? And after some time, there is some sort of alternation between who and whom. So we can say, whom did you invite or who did you invite? So this is the normal replication and the altered replication. This means that there is some sort of alternation between the two terms which are used. So both forms are used now simultaneously. But even in some instances of what Croft terms hyperanalysis or hypercorrection, okay, this example refers to alternation between the formal and the informal. Okay, he calls this hyperanalysis or hypercorrection. By hyperanalysis and hypercorrection, according to Croft, we mean that there is some sort of alternation between a formal use and an informal use. This is called hyperanalysis or hypercorrection. The example of who and whom is an example of hyperanalysis or hypercorrection. So when we say, who did you invite? This is informal. And whom did you invite? This is formal. And this means this is some sort of alternation. And we refer to this, as I told you, hyperanalysis or hypercorrection.